Capcom have been one of the best performing Japanese software companies, and they've done it through games like Resident Evil series and the Monster Hunter series. And a couple of days ago, they've released their financials for the year that's just passed, and they've released their strategies and plans for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2021. So let's go ahead and take a look at what they've got coming up. So the first slide, they're talking about what they expect the growth will be in the market that they're in, the video game market. And you can see here they've highlighted the 2019 box, and they've said that the mobile content, the total video game market, is currently about $920 million. That would be $90 billion. That would be $90 billion because it's in 100 million USD. So that's $90 billion for mobile content. They expect that the PC games will be about $38 billion and about $35 billion for console. And through to 2024, they see mobile growing at around 30% growth to 2024. And but they don't see the same growth in PC, where it's growing from only 384 to about 433. And in the console, they expect quite a bit of growth, a bit more than PC. It will grow to about this is 35 billion, so it will grow to about 53 billion. And they expect that the total market will be over $220 billion. So basically, they're seeing more growth in mobile and console. And I think that's probably where people should expect their attention to lie, that they're going to be looking more into the console market and also the mobile market in the coming years ahead. They don't see as much growth in PC. That's not to say they won't invest in that area, but they see potential in console and mobile. Now, ever since the PS4 was launched, Capcom have done really well this generation. And you can see here when PS4 launched back in 2014 that their growth has increased every year. Their operating income and net income. Previously, before that, they were actually not doing so great in the PS3 era, and it was looking at the tail end of the PS3 era that they were starting to lose income. So Capcom have rebounded pretty amazingly well, and it's looking like they will continue to grow in the same way for PlayStation 5 and next generation. Now, these are the areas where they think their businesses will lie and what the growth will be like looking ahead. So they think that it will be mobile and esports, where they see the most growth at the moment. You can expect that this is where we are, where we're at profit. But in the medium term, mobile content and esports will grow slowly, but in the long term, it's going to increase significantly. And they will keep producing consumer new titles, which includes new IPs, but also new games from their existing IPs. So things like Resident Evil 8 and Monster Hunter World 2. So they will continue to produce those type of titles. And they will also continue to profit from past catalog titles. So all of their older stuff, like all of the older Resident Evils and Street Fighters and Monster Hunter titles. And they also have some amusement related businesses. So these would be owning amusement centers, like arcade centers, and also in Japan, pachinko is very popular. So they have pachinko and pachislo slot machines, and they don't see that growing as much, but they do see it as a steady base. Now, they also write here that they're aiming for stability despite worsening market conditions. So that's kind of telling me already that it's not looking like there's much growth in the amusement area. And that's kind of true because even in Japan, arcades have been on the decline, particularly with a lot of mobile, people playing a lot of mobile. So people aren't going to the arcades as much. And of course, like a lot of the technologies we see these days, we see it in all of our consoles and PCs and mobiles. We don't have to go to the arcade to see the latest technology. And not to get too far ahead, but of course, there's coronavirus concerns, and people may not go out as much, so they probably won't be visiting arcades and touching the same arcade joysticks and all of that, all of those issues. Now, they say they're important themes for financial year through to March 21. That they're aiming for a new record of 28 million units in sales for their consumer business, and they're going to promote digital strategy via expansion of sales regions and flexible pricing, and aim to release multiple major titles and pursue ongoing sales for major titles from past years. So this is really interesting where it says sales regions. So obviously they are not selling in all the regions that they could possibly sell at the moment, and there's a lot of other countries out there, so they're probably not that into Africa as yet, and maybe they will start to expand there. And also in Asia as well, we see a lot of growth in Asia, particularly in the Central Asia regions, and also the South Asia regions like India and Pakistan. But this is also really interesting where it says flexible pricing. So on Steam they have regional pricing, and we've seen with Capcom, they used to do a lot of regional pricing in the past. So, for example, even Resident Evil 2, which was released last year, had regional pricing in Malaysia, where I am at the moment. And that was a lot cheaper. So it would have been about $25 at launch for Resident Evil 2, compared to $60 for America and Europe. But however, they've stopped that now in Malaysia. So Resident Evil 3 was about $80. So perhaps not all regions are going to get flexible pricing, but it seems like they still want to continue that, and I'm assuming that they will continue that most likely in the regions where they have the most amounts of piracy. So it will be in areas like China and India and Russia, where they'll probably continue to have cheaper pricing to entice people to just buy it on Steam rather than pirate the game. And looks like they're going to release a number of titles in the year coming. So even though we see in Wikipedia there aren't a whole lot of titles coming out, they look like they're still going to release a few titles, major titles, before the end of March 21. So now other businesses that they're talking about are grow licensing revenue and esports business. So build presence as an IP company by strengthening licensing revenue. Broaden esports base via online league play in Japan and overseas. So the first one, obviously, that's looking at themselves as a company that takes itself seriously and grows their brands. So they're trying to grow the Resident Evil brand and trying to grow the Street Fighter brand and the Monster Hunter brand. And they're looking to strengthen that by increasing the licensing revenue. So that may be other products and other offshoot products that these franchises will help add to their revenues and profits. And they also talk about esports. So right now, the only esport title that they really have is Street Fighter. And technically, while Monster Hunter, maybe they could develop something from that as an online league play. Right now, it really looks like it's just Street Fighter. So they have a lot of potential here, but they really need to, I guess, make another type of IP or make another type of game to fit this online league play. And maybe this hints at games coming down the line for Capcom. So who knows? Maybe we'll get like a sports title or a Rocket League title from Capcom. But looks like they want to branch into the esports market. Now they have forecasts for the financial year ahead, and there's not too much to say, but they expect growth in every area. So they expect growth in their sales and income. There's not that much to say about that. They have some coronavirus impact and response. So I won't read it, but you can go ahead and have a look yourself. Now, they've highlighted that they want to grow on the digital market front. So this is very, very interesting because in 2019, so the year that's, actually 2020 March. So last year, they had 129. So there's 100 million yen. So that would be 129. Sorry, that would be 129 million dollars of package sales. So that would be physical copies, and digital, they had 426 million US dollars of digital sales. So, but if you have a look and see, package sales were 359, so it's decreased significantly from 2019, from a year ago, while digital contents have largely stayed the same. Now, they don't exactly go into why. They say that is the reason, but that could also be in terms of the number of releases that they've had, because in 2019 they had Resident Evil 2 and they might have had, I believe, Street Fighter, but in 2020 they had Resident Evil 3 and Monster Hunter Iceborne, and of course in 2019 they would have had Monster Hunter World as well. So that could be a reason why they have less sales in 2020, but they see more growth in digital, and they don't see the package sales increase by all that much in the future. Now, they have sales for, and they don't go into the sales for every single title, but they have sales for, let's just read 2019 and 2020. 2019 they had 61 new titles, and in 2020 they had 35 titles. So that says a lot about what happened when they had reduced sales from their package sales. So in 2019 they had 359 million US dollars because they had 61 titles, and in 2020 they had 35 new titles, which explains 129 million dollars worth of package titles. And in 2021 they have 13 new titles, and obviously they haven't announced all of them yet, so they're not going to list that, but you could expect, you know, definitely more than 13, maybe around 20 or 30. Maybe they won't get back to 61 titles in 2019, but yeah, it'll definitely be more than 13. And they've listed their major titles for 2021 to be Resident Evil 3, Monster Hunter World Iceborne, and Resident Evil 2 Monster Hunter World as their catalog titles. So they're telling us that Resident Evil 3 sold 2.5 million copies, which is a great number now. This pretty much released after March 31st, if I'm not mistaken, or at least 1 week before March 31st. I know on PC it was around early April for Resident Evil 3, so they wouldn't have had that much data on it, but they're telling us now that around that week they've sold 2.5 million Resident Evil 3, which is a pretty good number, but I think it's down on Resident Evil 2, because I think Resident Evil 2 now is at around 6.5 million. And I think this is probably to do with the fact that Resident Evil 3 wasn't as well received by critics. The Metacritic was down a little bit from Resident Evil 2. So I think Resident Evil 2, the Metacritic was around high 80s, like 88, 89. And Resident Evil 3 was around 82. So that could have had an impact on the sales of Resident Evil 3. And also a lot of the fan reaction has been that Resident Evil 3 wasn't as good as 2. They still enjoy the game, but there were some issues with Resident Evil 3 having stuff cut out of it, and not being as close as a remake as the fans would have liked to the older version of Resident Evil 3 on the PlayStation. Now these are huge numbers for Monster Hunter World, and Capcom says that Monster Hunter World now exceeds cumulative 15.5 million units sold, along with Monster Hunter World Iceborne. So these would be combined sales for both Iceborne and World. And yeah, they're really huge numbers, considering this is the first time Monster Hunter has been on a, I guess, current gen console. In the past has been on Wii. I think it was on Wii U. And also mostly Monster Hunter was a portable game. At first that's where it started. It started on the PlayStation Portable, and then it moved to the 3DS. So, you know, that's really interesting, because at the time not that many people were playing it on PlayStation Portable, except in Japan, of course. So in Japan it was selling like crazy, like 5 million units every time. But most people in the West didn't play it on PlayStation Portable, and on 3DS I would say, and on Wii and Wii U. So this is really the first time it's come out in the West, and it seems to me that the West really enjoys Monster Hunter World, and the sales numbers are huge. And it's a reminder that, like, you know, current gen consoles in Japan aren't as big as they are in America. So most people in Japan would still be on portables and mobiles, and there is a portion of the audience on current gen, but in America the proportion is way different. Most people in America would be on mobiles and consoles, and most of the gamers would be on console. When I say console, that includes PCs. So and you see it with Monster Hunter World, because this is basically much improved graphics and a much larger game world than say it was on the portable systems, and people really enjoy it on the current gen systems, and it looks like Capcom have another hit on their hands. Now we'll get into like the actual numbers the series has sold a little bit later, but Monster Hunter is a huge franchise now for Capcom. Their mobile strategies are that Capcom will work to grow ongoing titles from the previous fiscal year, as well as launch new titles and pursue research into 5G technologies in preparation for wider adoption. Okay, they talk a bit about arcades, but basically they're saying that the market size is recovering in terms of arcade market sales, so the number of machines that they're actually selling are increasing, although I believe, with coronavirus and this will basically plummet. So expect amusement market sales to just drop, and also that, but they're saying that in that same period of time that the their arcade machines are selling, the actual number of arcades is actually decreasing. And that's also going to plummet as well this year due to coronavirus, I think. They also say that Capcom are going to adhere to call for temporary closures due to spread of COVID-19, monitor the situation while considering operations going ahead. Yeah, I just don't see anybody going out to the arcades anytime soon. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense touching the controls and the social distancing issue. I think a lot of people are just going to take the easy option, play at home. Everyone has a mobile anyway, so they have gaming access right with them. Now here, if you look at the arcade operations plan, you can see that while their sales for arcade machines, there will be a slight decrease. Basically, they're not expecting any operating income, so they've got zero for that. They don't expect the arcades to, be very functioning this year. Now, they also say Pachinko and Pachislo is also going to go down, and it will also plummet pretty much the same as arcades, I believe. Look, this is really interesting because as you may or may not know, Konami, who make the Metal Gear franchise, they put a lot of investment into getting bigger into the Pachinko and Pachislo market. So it looks like that's kind of not going to turn out very well for them either. Maybe they're going to come back into the ball game with more video games. But Konami is a very diversified business. They have like gym clubs and a lot of that sort of other thing as well. But they're at the moment, Konami are kind of like just down to 2 games basically, which is Pro Evolution Soccer and Metal Gear Solid. And they haven't really brought out anything for Metal Gear. It's really just been Pro Evo Soccer. Now, of course, they got some mobile games, but Konami, I think that will be a very interesting financial year report, to say the least. But going back to Capcom now, look, Pachinko and Pachislo is probably not going to do very well. I'm not going to spend too much time on that because we're all about video games anyways. So if you want, you can check that out. If you love Capcom and you care about their Pachinko business, then check that out. Okay. We'll just skip a couple of these. And they have... they state that their esports strategy is going to hold domestic and overseas tournaments online because of coronavirus, and they want to hold tournaments for female players to further growth demographics. that's great news because too many times we've seen all of these Evo tournaments and it's basically 95% male. It makes no sense because even in the games they have lots of female characters. So this is not just a male dominated hobby. It needs to include everyone, and it makes a lot of sense to hold more tournaments, at least to begin with, to encourage female players to come out and play these games. I've got a daughter, so it just makes total sense to have a more incentive for female players to play. Now, they believe that stable businesses will be approximately 25% of their net sales, and that's probably going to include their characters, like character merchandising, books, adapt games into movies, animation stage, and pachinko and pachislo and arcades will be about 25% of their business, but they really see that 75% of their sales will be to their mainline consumer business of selling video games, both their new titles and their catalog titles, and also their mobile contents will be part of their growth business. Now, how they're going to do this, they've got a beautiful graphic here of all the different ways that they're going to do it, and they're going to do some concerts and cafe collaborations that will appeal to families, capture casual players with smartphone games. So it looks like they have Monster Hunter Riders on mobile that will hopefully get casual players to play Monster Hunter World. And they have home video games, Pachislo slot machines, and look, seems like they're going to do, well, maybe a Monster Hunter movie. And that looks, on the left, looks like a Resident Evil movie. So very interesting time, and they have Hollywood movies very high up on their chain of, I guess, things that they want to do here. So look forward to some announcements on that front in terms of movies. They talk a bit about their, I guess, their the number of people that are working for them, and also their capabilities of their company. Now, this is probably the most interesting part. Their leading game series brands, their franchises. So if you didn't know, Resident Evil series is by far and away their biggest franchise, and they've sold over 98 million units, which is really surprising given that that started in the PlayStation era, and Street Fighter started in the, I would say, SNES era, if you don't count the first Street Fighter, because it was really Street Fighter 2 that got it started. So it's way dwarfed Street Fighter, which I think I didn't really expect the gap to be that much, because Resident Evil, it still takes somebody who wants to play horror games to play Resident Evil, whereas Street Fighter feels like almost anybody could casually play. Almost everybody has played Street Fighter 2 at the arcades, and I don't really know anyone that hasn't. Now, Monster Hunter, 15 million units of this is Monster Hunter World in the last couple of years. So this has done almost a quarter of their business in the last 2 years, and it's really grown the Monster Hunter brand, and I guess leapfrogged Street Fighter within a couple of years. And I don't think Capcom really expected that at all, and I don't think anybody expected that. When Monster Hunter was released on next gen, I think a lot of us would have been hopeful about Monster Hunter, but not really expect the success that it would have had. Everybody kind of at that time still saw it as a portable game. So it's kind of like bringing Resident Evil Revelations to the console. you don't expect too much because it was a portable game to begin with. So this has kind of blown expectations away. I think the interesting part here is that they went for a full console game and they didn't just port Monster Hunter Ultimate 4 to the consoles and just increase the resolution. They went for a brand new title, and that shows that people really took interest when it's a new title. Now, Devil May Cry has also done really well for them, although yeah, it's definitely not as popular as the Resident Evil series. I think in some ways it's because it's quite a gamer game in terms of because it's quite a hard game, so that it's not as easy to play as Resident Evil, I would say. And Mega Man continues to do well, although I don't really know how well it's done of late. They've released the Mega Man compilations, and sure, maybe lots of people that would sell a lot, but I don't think it was like a $60 release. So in terms of revenue, it probably wouldn't be as much as the other titles. And I don't think if they released the Mega Man like a brand new 4 console title, modernized Mega Man, it would sell as well. I don't know how many fans there are, because I think it's still a very niche, and it's always been a 2D series. Maybe they should do like a new Super Mario Brothers like type of game for new Mega Man. Maybe that would help it regenerate some of that nostalgia and regenerate some of those lost fans from that series and bring them back. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into these numbers. Most of that has been already been covered by the sales right at the start of this video, so you can take a look at that. But that's basically the presentation that they gave. And I guess my final thoughts on Capcom is that they've shown that they're the best Japanese software developer from this generation anyway. If you look at the Japanese developers, and not including Nintendo, of course, because Nintendo are making their own hardware. Just talking about the third-party developers right now and publishers. If you look at Capcom, they've done really well at growing their brands, kind of just the same way as Nintendo have done. And they're doing it in a much better way than, say, Namco or Square, Sega. Because I think if you look at Sega's titles, they still kind of appeal to that niche audience, and they haven't really grown into getting bigger. You see, like, the Sega titles never sell, like, except for Football Manager, of course. But their other titles, they're still selling, I guess, a lot lower, and they're not hitting mainstream as well. Maybe it's a marketing thing. Who knows right now? And same with Namco and Square. Square, I think, take just way too long to get their games out. So something like Final Fantasy VII Remake, people have been hearing about that, and it was announced 5 years ago. I think it was announced 2015. It's only just come out. So they're just taking way too long, and it's not even the complete game. It's like only part 1 of many parts. But Square still have a lot of franchises that they have in their back pocket. Final Fantasy is still huge, and they could really just keep coming out with a Final Fantasy remake every single year, and that would just sell. But again, I think they've kind of mismanaged what this generation was going to be like. They've been trying to make the best game ever, and they want to make that masterpiece. And if it takes them 5 years to do it, then they're going to do it. Whereas I think that's kind of hurt them, because AAA titles are not cheap these days to make, and they take infinitely longer than what it used to take back in, say, like the PlayStation 1 or PlayStation 2 era. Now you need massive teams like on the size of Ubisoft or Rockstar to compete at that level. So that's kind of why Square's kind of lost its way, I would say, a little bit. Maybe somebody's going to come back with some figures telling me that Square's doing exceedingly well, but on the surface, it doesn't look like it. And Namco has just been, they haven't exceeded expectations, and they haven't really underperformed. They've just been kind of where they are. And there's really not a whole lot to say about Namco, because like they brought out Tekken 7, they brought out Soul Calibur 6, and they've stuck with the Tales series, but aside from that, they haven't really shown a whole lot that's new, which is a little bit concerning. Hopefully for Namco, and I guess all of the other Japanese developers, that they're going to come out with new IPs in the, I guess now that we're going next gen, this is exactly the right time where you bring out a new IP, because this is where you show new technologies, and this is where you start to grow the fan base again. You see with every single console launch, you oftentimes get new IPs announced, and most of the time this is because people like to throw things at the wall and see what sticks. People at launch don't have so much choice, so they're happy to go with whatever. If there's something new, then they're happy to just buy that and check that out. Whereas later on in the life cycle, people want to play like the third version of, say, like Uncharted 3 or The Last of Us 2. They want the sequel by then. So that's probably why we haven't seen a lot of new IPs announced. They're going to wait for these next gen consoles. And E3 was supposed to be in about a month, and we were going to, if E3 was actually on, we would have had the console announcements, and they would have come with a lot of new IPs. So we're not really that far from hopefully seeing a lot of new titles being announced. But when the other publishers come out with their financial year reports, I'll definitely check that out. And if they do, yeah, I'll try and post a video. But for now, yeah, that's it for this Capcom look at their last year and their forward strategies for next year. Hope you enjoyed that. If you like this video, click on the like button, please, to help grow the channel, and subscribe for more videos. Thanks for watching. Bye.